Please note, introductions at the beginning of this meeting were not recorded due to technical difficulties.
We have already held and will likely still hold workshops to make sure that everybody who needs to make one of those applications is able to. And then lastly, in January of 2029, that's the estimated effective date for the conservation requirements that will come into effect. It sounds like we've got someone online. I apologize. When those conservation requirements will become effective in the first management plan. Before we get into it, though, this is a list of information that will be available to you to help you answer your questions. Right off the bat, that's my personal email. That may be a mistake, I don't know, but I want you to know that if you've got questions or if I can be helpful to you, that's how you can get a hold of me. Some of you have my number. I don't know if that was wise, but also here's the link for the presentation and recordings of these meetings, information about applications, where you can submit comments on the management goal and plan, and our active management area, customer service, phone number, and email. During this process, we're going to need lots of stakeholder input, including in public meetings like this one. But additionally, we have folks who are already reaching out to us about their particular situations and also situations for similarly situated folks. So if you or a group of stakeholders feel like it would benefit you to reach out and talk to the department, we're open to that. Reach out and let us know. And obviously schedules become a bit tricky, especially as we get further into the year, but we want you to know that we need your input and we're willing to listen. So whether that's here in a public meeting, in a phone call, or a sit down conversation, whatever makes sense, we're here to do that. Oh, you're good. Thanks. Okay, before we get into the meat of it, just because I don't want anyone here to miss a deadline, we want to just remind some folks of important deadlines for grandfathered rights. I'm pretty close to the screen and even I'm having a hard time reading this. So let me just tell you what it says, and this will be available to you online. Number one, like we said, April 8th of next year, April 8, 2026 is the deadline for grandfathered rights. Irrigation grandfathered rights are for lands that were irrigated in between 10/23/2019 and 10/23/2024. This is also the deadline for non-irrigation grandfathered rights. And if you have an application that you would like to submit for substantial capital investment, that would be included in your application for an irrigation grandfathered right as well. If you have questions, reach out to us. We'll make sure that you have the information that you need. I'm moving over here because this is buzzing at me, and I want to make sure that I'm not causing it. I was causing it. I'm sorry. I'm going to walk over here. You can look at the screen, but I'm here. All right. Let's talk about groundwater conditions in Willcox. I'm so sorry, everyone. Excellent. That was horrendous. Okay. This shouldn't be news to you. Since the 1940s, groundwater pumping far exceeds natural recharge, right? That's called overdraft. We'll talk a little bit today about what overdraft means, but because of it, wells are going dry, you know that, and we see subsidence in the basin. The ground level is sinking. That subsidence rate is over 11 feet in some places. We also have a problem with fissuring. You can go to the next one, that's fine. We have a problem with fissuring with nearly 50 miles of earth fissures here in the basin as of 2023, which are damaging public and private property, roads, fencing, homes. Unless we deal with this, these problems will continue. You can hit the next slide. Thanks, Dennis. So the way that we deal with this is through the Willcox management goal and the management plan. When we talk about this, the reason that we're going to cover this is because at the end of this presentation, we're going to ask you for feedback on the proposed goal. And then we're going to ask you for feedback on two elements of the management plans. So as we go through there, I'm going to point those out. First, on the management goal, we're going to talk about what the goal does, how the goal informs the management plan, and we're going to try and clarify some important concepts and correct some misconceptions that we've heard about. Again, hitting this timeline, we won't belabor the point. Between now and January 2027 is when we're going to establish that goal and the plan. So when I say the management goal and I say the management plan, what am I talking about? The management goal is how we address the problem that we're here to solve, right? We're here because overdraft is causing subsidence issues and it's imperiling groundwater supplies. So we'll set a goal to address that issue. That goal then informs the management plan. The management plan sets conservation requirements that will reduce groundwater pumping. So how do they work? When you set a management goal and when you set a management plan, the entire point is to address the cause of the AMA. On this right side of the screen, it's difficult to read, but that's an excerpt from the order establishing the Willcox AMA. And in that order, the director found that subsidence is endangering property, that groundwater needs to be protected because of overpumping, and that fissuring was endangering property. We have to address those issues. And so our goal will address that, and our plan will implement requirements to reduce groundwater pumping so that we can solve that problem. So this is the draft goal that we proposed. Specifically, the goal of the AMA, and this that we're proposing, is to support the long-term viability of the regional economy, mitigate land subsidence, and extend the life of the aquifer by reducing groundwater overdraft by at least 50% by 2075. You've seen this one before. When we proposed this, we got a lot of questions, really good ones, and we're noticing a few misconceptions that we want to address. The first one, when we say reduce overdraft, does that mean that everyone has to reduce their pumping by 50%? The answer is no. The draft management goal says overdraft for a reason. Overdraft is not the same as pumping, and we can walk through how that works. Next time, I'll have slides that have bigger text. But what this says is that you have different things going into an aquifer and coming out, different amounts of water, I should say. You have natural inflows, water that goes into the aquifer naturally. You have artificial inflows if someone puts water into the aquifer. And then you have natural outflows and artificial outflows where water comes out of the aquifer. If the same amount of water is going in and coming out, that's not overdraft. You have a balance. It's like a bank account when you're spending as much or less than what you're earning. But if you are out of balance, if you have more water coming out of the aquifer than is going in, that is overdraft. Could you hit the next slide? So we're going to imagine a hypothetical scenario. I've got a chart here to try and help illustrate the difference between pumping and overdraft. This light blue represents inflows, the amount of water that goes into the aquifer. When it rains and it seeps down into the aquifer, that's your inflows. The blue, dark blue on the left, those are your outflows, the amount of water that's pumped out or leaves the aquifer naturally. But everything that goes beyond the inflow, that is your overdraft. So when we say reduce overdraft by 50%, that doesn't mean cut the entire left bar in half. That means cut overdraft, the orange bar, in half. And I'll show you what I mean. If we divide that orange bar in half to where the top is 50% and the bottom part of that orange is 50%, that is the overdraft that we're talking about. So, get the next one. Thanks. One more. One more, if you would. Perfect. If this bar on the left, hypothetically, this is just an example, represents the amount of pumping or use or outflows that exist at the first year, the one on the right would hypothetically represent at the end of a 50-year period, where overdraft has been reduced by 50%. But you'll notice outflows have not been reduced by 50%. In this particular example, there's only been about a third of a reduction. Now, this does not represent the exact situation in Willcox, but we give it as an example. So when we talk about reducing overdraft, what we mean is reducing the amount of groundwater pumped out that exceeds the amount that is balanced with inflows. So what could that look like over time? Our goal is designed around the idea of a gradual change. So if this bar on the far left is all of the outflows in a given year, at the end of a 50-year period, you can see that gradual reduction towards a 50% reduction in overdraft by 2075. Now, if you'd go back one more time, a normal measurement of inflows and outflows won't look clean like this. And you all know this, right? Some years are wetter than others, right? Some years we have a good monsoon, and sometimes it's like this year, and not so much. So these will be a lot messier, but we give this as an example. Go ahead and go to the next. Thanks. So now we've talked about how that reduction would need to happen. We do that through what are called conservation programs in the management plan. And a lot of folks wanted to know, what does that mean? Do the same requirements apply to everyone? Not everyone is similarly situated. And the answer is they don't have to. There is flexibility here. Conservation requirements are set by sector, meaning agricultural users will have a program specific to agriculture. Industrial users would have a program specific to industry, and municipal users would have a municipal specific program because they're different and they're treated differently. But then, even when you have folks that are the same sector, you all know this, some ag users here are not in the same situation as others. You have large users with a lot of capacity, and you have smaller users with significantly less. Complicating it even more, you also have folks who, for whatever reason, may have planted low water use crops and are in a different position when it comes to the ability to cut than other folks. And so people have asked us, they want to know, are there options here? And the answer is yes. In Douglas, when they set the management, or they created the management plan, what they did is they said, we're going to treat different users differently based on the number of acres that they had. The highest number of acres were required to meet a more stringent water efficiency standard, and those with less acres were held to a lower standard. Still stringent enough to make sure that people were being good stewards with the water, but not to the same rigorous level as those with more acres. That kind of flexibility exists in Willcox as well. Now, what does that mean and how will that look? We have some options there, and we're going to need your input. And one of the things that we'll will ask you, and we'll ask for your input today, is whether you feel like that is something that should be done in the Willcox AMA. Whether treating folks differently is worth doing when we're talking about, for example, different size ag users or folks who are amongst ag users who have planted low water use crops as opposed to more conventional crops. We're going to ask for that input today.
I can't hear it.
I'm so sorry. I understand. I apologize. If I do that, I'm going to be looking at you and you look at me. I'll correct myself. I apologize. So the next question is, will the community have more input on the management goal and the management plan? The answer is absolutely. We need your input today, but we're also going to need your input moving forward. As we create the management plan with conservation programs by sector, we are going to need help for each of those sectors. And so I expect we're going to need to have conversations and meetings with folks in those sectors to talk through those specific needs. Another question that we've received is whether what happens here is going to affect the active management areas in the Phoenix area, the Pinal active management area, or the Tucson active management area. The answer is no. The reason for that is in the law, they distinguish between what are called the initial AMAs, like the Phoenix AMA and the Tucson AMA, and what are called subsequent AMAs, the new ones. I'm talking about Willcox and Douglas, and if another AMA were to come along, that would also be a subsequent AMA. The law treats them differently. The Phoenix and Tucson and Pinal AMAs, the initial AMAs, they have a set of requirements set in law. It's pretty straightforward. The subsequent AMAs follow as closely as practicable those elements, but they have more ways to adapt to the situations that these communities find themselves in. Willcox is not Phoenix. I don't have to tell you that. You have significantly more limited options when it comes to surface water supplies. The Colorado River does not come in through the CAP to Willcox. So an AMA has to be adapted to the situation here. When we make those adaptations, when we find a way that works for Willcox, that doesn't affect Phoenix, that doesn't affect Tucson, that's for Willcox. All right. So we've talked about overdraft. That number is now going to matter. And we are compiling information for the most recent years to get the most accurate number that we can for you. We are going to have those estimates out to you this fall, and we're going to use a 5-year average to account for fluctuations. As you know, some years are wetter, some years are drier. So when we look at overdraft, we are going to take an average of 5 years. This is consistent with how we do other types of averages in our modeling and in our planning. Could you go back one more? Thanks. Go back one more time. Back. There you go. Okay, thank you. So before we move on to this, and I'll hand it over to Madison, what I want to put a pin in as we've talked about this, the management goal is to reduce overdraft by 50% by 2075 in order to protect against subsidence and fissuring and to protect the regional economy. Number 2, how we do that will be the management plan. And Madison's going to talk through that. Establishing that management plan is going to take input from all of you and specific input from the different sectors. And so we ask for your input on that, both today and into the future. And I expect we're going to have more conversations with a lot of you folks, if not all of you folks, as we work through this. So I'll hand this over, or you can say where you want, to Madison to talk through the management plan.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, let's not do that today. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for coming. Again, I am Madison Moreno. I am the AMA Establishments Coordinator. I'll be mainly working on the management plans with you all. Next slide, please. So the biggest portion of this presentation is the management plan. We'll be going over how it connects with the management goal, the timeline with it, how it connects and is different from the initial AMAs, and why we must include measures that, you're going to hear me say this a lot, reduce the withdrawals of groundwater. Next slide. All right, so the management plans, they're built off of the management goal. We set this management goal to reduce overdraft by 50% by 2075, this draft. So this management plan, we're going to implement conservation requirements that are driving to meet this goal. What these conservation requirements are going to look like is kind of up to all of us. We're going to be creating these programs that are catered and tailored to you all, what works for Willcox, because it doesn't work here what is working in Phoenix and Tucson. And it's going to be set over a period of time. We're going to look at it in sections. Next. Again, you're going to hear me say, we have to create these conservation measures that reduce the withdrawals of groundwater. That does not mean we are reducing 50% of withdrawals. It just means we have to push towards and move towards achieving that groundwater management goal. Okay. Nope. Sorry. All right. So we have to, in the management plan, include measures that reduce the withdrawals of groundwater, because we are required to set these conservation requirements that include these volumetric cuts. We understand that the supply is different. We're not diversified in our supply down here. It's going to have to come from volumetric cuts. As Ben stated, we have different sectors, we have different users. We have agricultural users, we have municipal users, and we have industrial users. These are the three main programs within the management plan. I like to call it the meat. Within these sectors are where the conservation programs are kind of tailored to. We'll see where we have different programs, where we'll have different meetings to cater to each of these users and grow and develop ideas based off of that. These conservation programs within the management plan, it will include regulatory and conservation requirements, reporting requirements, flexibility provisions, compliance provisions, and planning requirements. They will all be tailored a little bit differently, considering you're all using a little bit differently, but they'll all be kind of structured the same way. One more. All right, you've seen this timeline. We added a little bit to it. Right now, we're in step one. We're developing the management goal and the management plan. We are in the public meetings portion. We're talking through these programs. We're developing ideas. We're going to be having conservation program workshops that are individualized to each sector and going over background and ideas and building off of what we can do, what will work, what ideas that maybe are not good ideas. I would love for you to tell me if I have a bad idea or if I have a good idea. That is something that I would really appreciate all of your input on. Once we have these conservation program workshops coming down here, collaborating, please send me your input. We will be posting an informal draft that where you can all provide your comment, and we will also be providing that informal draft to the GUAC board. Once that is presented and the draft has been edited and kind of pushed to the limit, we will have a hearing and adoption process for that first management plan. We have to adopt that management plan 2 years after the establishment of the AMA, which is January 8th, 2027. So we're on a timeline. Once that timeline of January 8th, 2027, and we adopt the management plan, 2 years after the adoption is the effective date for those conservation programs. We understand that that's kind of far out. However, that's helping and pushing towards getting there, preparing and pushing to get to those conservation requirements and allowing to mentally, physically prepare to be able to see those conservation requirements, reporting requirements, compliance provisions, and get familiar with those. All right. Up next, the individual sector workshops. We are hoping to have the municipal and industrial conservation program workshops this next month. We understand that it is harvest season for some folks right now, so we're pushing the agricultural program workshop to the fall, and some other data analysis workshops where we can discuss a little bit more in depth of overdraft and how we're going to look at that across. These workshops are going to go a lot more in depth than what I've kind of covered with each sector. Really how historically we've looked at these programs and what we all want to see within them. With the creation of these new programs, I really, really would love to hear your input. And please, please feel free to reach out to me, to the team, to Ben. We really appreciate all of your stakeholder input. I will be passing this off to Ben now.
Okay, so we moved through this pretty quickly because we wanted to leave as much time open for all of you. Could you hit the next slide, Dennis? So like I said, we're going to talk about three things. We want to hear from you about the draft goal, now that we've walked through some of the misconceptions that are out there. Number two, we'd like to hear from you about whether or not, when it comes time to implement reductions, whether it is better to wait on immediately implementing reductions and ease into them later, or if it's time to start with reductions now and have a more steady rate of reduction over time. And lastly, the third thing, we'd like your input on whether there ought to be different conservation requirements that apply to different users. For example, larger versus smaller users, or when it comes to crop types, low water use crops, as opposed to more conventional higher water use crops. I'll have a mic. We'll be handing around a mic. We really want to hear from all of you what you think. Yeah, let me grab one.
I didn't want to get up by that speaker and make it squeal like a pig with its head caught under a gate. I'm Ted Haas, a farmer. I'd like to say that I really appreciate the clarity of the discussion and the presentation tonight. I understand the timeline, the goal, and the plan. I think this is still going to be a process for this community. As one member of the ag community, I support the goal. I like the idea of the start immediately, but the gradual implementation of the plan over to 2075. I think it's good for us to remember that one of the goals is that we don't disrupt the current economy. We don't want to just shut this all down and kill this community. I think the time, by starting at the get-go in a small amount and working our way up, will allow for technology and adaptation. And I also think that there should be room for the different types of users and low water use crops. I think the industry can come to agreement on that. So I'm in support of what's been presented as a frame and to work with. And I would encourage that the greater community would also be in support, and that we keep in mind, I guess I really like keeping in mind the importance of not pulling the rug out under the current local economy. Thank you.
Good job, Ted. I'd just like to ask you all, we've had meetings here and this building was packed, standing room only. The majority of people said we want to control this and do it ourselves. What you said is really good. I agree with what you said. You're asking us for our input, but are you going to go back and 3 days later do what you want to do, like you did after the last meetings we had here?
So it sounds like, you tell me if I've got you right. Your question is, yeah, we want to hear from you. How much does that actually matter? Right? Okay. I think it matters a lot, right? What we're doing right now is we're dealing with a situation in Willcox where we have an issue. And I can understand that desire to find a way that doesn't mean, more government telling you what to do, right? I grew up on the other side of the mountain in the Gila Valley. I feel a little sensitivity about coming into a rural place like Willcox and saying, we know what's best for you. And that's why I think it's so important that we have this input. Now, the reality of an active management area is the way that it's structured, we've got to deal with reducing overdraft. And like Madison said, when an AMA is created, because groundwater supplies are imperiled, because there's fissuring, because there's subsidence, we have to act to address those things. So that's going to be the thing that we're looking towards. Are we able to address that? But while we do that, we're going to need help in crafting something that makes sense, like Ted said, that doesn't pull the rug out from under the economy. So I think there's probably two parts to that. Yeah, Kip.
Some example public outreach with Douglas, something that you guys incorporated.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good question. The question from Caleb was, do we have examples of ways that we incorporated public input? Madison, do you want to? I was going to give an answer, but Madison will know better.
Yeah, I can definitely talk about that. Ben touched a little bit on it earlier, where we incorporated the tiered system of irrigation efficiencies of that 80, 83, and 85 based on acreage. That was the people of Douglas. They came up with that in our agricultural conservation workshop, and sat there together collaborating, and I kind of just stood there and watched and thought it was a great idea, and we implemented it into the management plan, and it's now there, adopted in. It was really a great idea and something that we wanted to see shown, because we can see that small users aren't treated the same as large users and vice versa. It's not equal on both ends. So that was a really, really great example of being able to show stakeholder input and idea, a brand new idea, into the management plan.
Right. 83, 85?
It's an irrigation efficiency percentage that we use to calculate water duties within the management plan. It's a specific calculation for each grandfathered right. The 80% is the smaller users, actually. It gets calculated with their allotment, and they'll receive that with their grandfathered right. Yes, I can do a quick calculation. So based on how many acres that they receive in their grandfathered right and what they're growing and the consumptive use of that crop and the irrigation efficiency based on that acreage, will do a calculation of that. So multiply the acreage by the consumptive use and divide it by that percentage. So 80, 83, or 85, and we'll get an allotment based off of that. It would be 2 years after the adoption of the management plan.
So for anyone, I know that some of the questions you probably couldn't hear. The questions that Madison was answering was, what is the 80, 83, and 85, right, that she had talked about? And it essentially amounts to how much is an agricultural user allowed to not apply to their field, to receive as water that doesn't actually make it to a crop. And we're going to require higher efficiencies from larger users.
Jackie Watkins, I'm actually in the Douglas AMA, and we're the ones who came up with the efficiency. So just as an example, if you had allotment of 5 acre-feet per acre, and at an 80% efficiency for the smaller farmer, they would actually get 6.25 acre-feet per acre. And the 83% would get like 6.05 acre-feet, and then the larger ones would get 5 acre-feet or 5.8. So the smaller the farm, the more water you had per acre, just because it's harder for the market gardeners and the smaller farms to decrease their revenue as much as it is the larger farms. So we were the ones who came up with that, and they listened to us with the, we did get that in. And so that the smaller farm does have more acre feet per acre than the larger farm. I don't remember.
For the small farm, for that 80% efficiency, it's 10 acres to, I don't want to mistake. It's in, it's
on
PowerPoint.
that slide.
We're going to go back to the slide with it. It's in here. It's kind of small. Oh, right there. It's small. So let's see. Yes, 10 to 99 is that 80%, and then 100 to 499 is that 83 and 500 plus. And we kind of did that based off of what we were receiving in applications, and kind of basing it off of ranges. So it's tailored to Douglas AMA specific.
So the question for everyone who couldn't hear was, okay, this idea for Douglas is based on the size of an operator, right? But what about folks who are using or who are growing low water use crops? How does that enter into the calculation? The answer to your question is, in Douglas, that wasn't a thing that they did. In Willcox, we have that flexibility. Now, how does that translate? What does that look like in the management plan? We don't have an answer for you yet. We don't have the management plan, but we're going to need that help. What I heard from Mr. Hawes today is he at least is open to that kind of an idea that different users are treated differently. If other folks here
Anything about agricultural users using a certain percentage of the 100.
ghosts on the internet, but what was I saying? Oh, right. So what that translates to here can look a lot of ways, and we're going to need input from all of you about how that plays out, right? What I heard from you is for some crops, you're thinking they're not the problem, is I think what I'm picking up.
You're not cooking out more.
Got it. As an industry. Okay. Sorry, what was that? Certainly. Steve raises a good point too, that some years wetter, some years are drier. So those are questions we're going to have to deal with. Understood. Understood. Yes.
So for those who have those low water use crops, is there a way of perhaps putting into the system where they can sell their additional allotment to other farms who might have higher need in order to kind of equalize that, and then they actually make that additional benefit from that extra water from their allotment?
This is a fascinating question. Are there market opportunities to sell and trade allotments? Unfortunately, we do have some clarity on that answer. When it comes to an IGFR, that is tied to the land. And the water right that comes to it is also tied to the land. Now, we do have some options about how amounts of water can be used. And we're exploring how those options can play out. We think that there's some opportunities. And I'm also realizing Ed was over there patiently waiting. So I'll be very quick. We have some options, we think, to talk about how conservation programs could play out. But as the law is written today, your rights are tied to the land, and the water that comes with those rights is tied to the land. So we have some places where we're flexible and others where we're not. There's a process for changing that. That's not something DWR gets to do. I don't vote on laws. They do that in Phoenix. So we can work with some flexibility in the space that the legislature saw fit to give us. Ed.
If I can make this thing work. I understand everybody's angst about this, and being appointed to Governor Hobbs' council almost 2 years ago now, I got to work specifically with all this group in this room, the leaders here under DWR. We have also been able to work with a small group that represented the largest part of the acres in the Willcox Valley. We started that way so we could keep it peaceful. We were in Phoenix and we were talking about how do we keep from having a chair throwing meeting and lots of cussing and lots of problems. Well, the number one way to do that was to get the number of acres with the smallest amount of growers into one room and talk about it. And we did. I think you folks, and especially you wine growers, will be tickled with what your fellow farmers are willing to do. And what they're willing to do, again, it's not in full draft by any means, but they're willing to have you folks not take any cuts at all. And you shouldn't.
DWR has been more than fair. I personally got to spend several hours with two of the attorneys, the older attorneys that wrote these laws, from the AMA that was established in 1980 to the subsequent AMA laws that we are now dealing with. Part of what kept this thing so confusing was that the younger group of attorneys had never dealt with a subsequent AMA. It just hadn't come around. Well, as we started digging, and I don't know really who gets the credit, if it was Patrick, if it was Natalie, if it was y'all, I don't know who brought up the idea of let's dig further into what subsequent AMA law says. And if you roll back in those slides, it talks about a very difference of an AMA versus a subsequent AMA. So we have a lot of flexibility. LaDonna, to your point, will they listen? Absolutely, they'll listen, because we have a way more flexibility. It's why we went this route. And you want to shoot somebody down, shoot me. I pushed this really hard starting in May because I had absolutely been so frustrated with anything to happen in the legislature. I testified at a House committee hearing. I did a lot of joking around because it was quite tense for about 3 hours, and I mean tense. Finally, Gail says, Ed, you better get your points out because you're going to run out of time. Well, my point was simple. The number one point was in the bill that was being presented, it had power plants taking the same cuts as agriculture. In Arizona, we're short of power. We're right there to not having enough power, and we have all kinds of new industries coming, AI and tech. They're coming, which are going to require more power. So we knew that was the poison pill of that bill. So Lisa Glenn and I talked a long time yesterday. For those of you that feel like the 1% a year is not near enough, I understand. But on the other hand, there's the crowd here that's scared of hurting their farms and businesses with too much cut. This is the best we've come up with so far. Not saying it's the answer, but I'm saying it is flexible. The attorneys that I have talked to that actually wrote this law, let me give you one example. In our valley, we know, those of us that farm and have used mega amounts of water through the years, we understand that there's parts of our farms that have better water than other parts. And areas, you know, I'll say an old name, the old Eddie Hart farm back up here in the Kansas settlement. There was an area there that didn't have any water, never had any water, and probably never will have any water. The dairy now owns that. That's a whole different basin than the rest. Now, get this. As we dug, guys, the one thing we seen that was clear, and I was sitting in the meeting with them and their attorneys when this came out, they thought this so far ahead that there's room to make a sub-basin within a basin. So once we're established AMA, it doesn't mean that that's the end. It means that if we see a problem in an area that's worse than other parts of the basin, they left a path that we can go. There's provision, and it's reasonable provision to add sub-basins within a basin. I'm not saying that's all that big a deal right this minute, but what I'm trying to get across to all of you is that the flexibility of the subsequent AMA over the original AMA is huge. And if over the next year and 2 years, we're welcome to more meetings, there's no such thing as nobody's not welcome to come talk. They are. And I want to defend this group because they have been very astute at learning and trying to be as fair as they can and not be harsh. And so, you know, one question always comes up for the vineyards. Well, can you add acres? At present, no. The way that law is written, you won't be able to add any more acres. But we're also not going to cut what water you have. Now, I'm speaking like I have this all figured out, and they're going to tell you, Ed, it's not in law yet, or it's not totally set, and that's right. But what we're saying is, what I'm giving you is ideas that have been in the room, that have laid out, that so that we can protect you guys that are using very little water. You need protected. You don't need in this crowd where some have used a lot of water. And then just last Friday, I spoke at the Arizona Pecan Growers Association, and it's on the opposite end of the spectrum. They need lots of water. Guess who's just as equally interested in protecting this as all the others? The pecan growers, because they have a crop that probably has potential for 100 years. So they want to pass it down from family to family to family. So there is a blend of how we all make this work. So we have grape growers on this end using very little. We have pecan growers on this side. Then I'll touch just a little bit on the flex acres. Y'all asked about if someone is given more water allotment than they use, what can they do with it? After the second year, not the first, if they saved it in 25, they can sell it as flex water in 27. I want to make that real clear. Now, it can only be passed on once. Whoever buys that cannot sell it again, but it can go to bank for what they're using for a long time. This is some of the flexibility that the early writers of this put in and gives DWR for flexibility. There's some negative things about this flexibility, but as a whole, it's way better than anything we were coming up with legislative life. And Lisa, to your point, yeah, we know it's not enough. On the other hand, from the other side, maybe it's reasonable enough to get us started. So that's what I wanted to share, is that know that there's no use coming with anger and hate toward these folks. In fact, Madison got this dropped in her lap. Natalie took a job. Natalie had been there quite a while, and she trained Madison. These young people are really trying hard, and I do nothing but commend them, because they're looking at this for your future and our future, and they're willing to listen, and they're not our enemy. They're here to listen. So thank you.
Thanks, Ed. I'll note a few things. I might be one of those young attorneys who doesn't know enough that Ed talked about, but I'd be a bad one if I didn't put a pin in one of the things he said, which is, that's right, the management plan isn't set yet, so there are no details that have been hammered out. But that's right, we have heard from some folks that they see a future where people would be treated differently, and we want to explore that option if that's right for this community. What I'm hearing right now is that folks are open to that conversation. The details matter. I think Ted said that. The details are going to matter. And I expect that as we talk through those details, we're going to see some of those differences of opinion come to the top. But I think I see a path here, and I'm excited about that. And I'm seeing a question over here. Ed talked about the flexibility. That's not a topic that we can cover in just a few minutes, but we will have more to say about that in coming meetings.
Thanks. Okay. I don't hear very good, so better speak up. Okay. I have a few, I've been listening to all this, and I scribbled down some questions. First off is, how do you propose to stop an overdraft when it hadn't rained? It don't rain here. Answer.
Question, how do we propose to stop overdraft when it doesn't rain? Right? We know that there is some water coming in, right? So the question, I'm sorry? Well, we have inflows. There are natural amounts of inflows that come into the aquifer when it does rain. You raised a good point, right? There's not that much coming in. We understand that. And that's part of the reason why we haven't said reduce overdraft, full stop, right? The kind of shock to the economy that we would expect from expecting the entire community to go from overdraft to none would be significant. And so we imagine a gradual change, and that's why.
What's your artificial plans for recharge?
What are our plans for artificial? Well, what I did say, I now understand the question. We did bring up artificial recharge. That's one of the ways water comes in. I think that probably needs to be part of what we're thinking about, right? I'm sorry, how?
Yeah.
Well, that's what we want to talk. Gotcha. That's one of the issues that we're going to have to work through when we set this management plan. I don't pretend to have all the answers for you today, right?
Question.
I'm here for all of them.
Okay. How will the community committee be picked?
The Groundwater Users Advisory Committee. That's right. Yes, sir. Anyone who's interested may apply to be on what's called, we call it the GUAC, the Groundwater Users Advisory Committee. I don't think we have a link on the presentation, but we can make sure that that's available on the website, and the governor's office will pick those.
How do you plan to reduce all the usage for the city and the municipalities and the farmers by 50% and continue growing crops and providing for the city?
How do we plan to have cuts and still allow for farming and industrial uses? Understood. How that works out is going to be the process that we go through when we set the management plan. These are very good questions. I don't mean to imply that I'm dismissive. I don't have those answers for you today. How we set those cuts, how they'll be distributed, that's something we're going to have to work out. And we've already heard a few folks sort of alluding to the fact that they're open to it, but the details matter. I don't have details for you today, but we invite your participation as we work them out.
Okay. In my limited high school education, to reduce reusage of 50%, that means you gotta have 50% less farming, 50% less of everything, and 50% of us are gonna have to leave this valley. Okay? What do you think?
I sure hope not. That doesn't sound right to me. Oh, well, what I will say, and I promise to give it right back to you. We are not saying reduce the population by 50%. We are not saying reduce agriculture by 50%. That's exactly right. We talked about reducing the amount of overdraft, not even frankly reducing usage by 50%, but the amount of
Gotta reduce usage.
That's right. Volumetric reductions. Yeah, that's right. I hope that the kind of things you're talking about isn't on the table even slightly, right? What we're talking about is ways to become more efficient, ways to reduce usage, ways to do more with less. I think that's the only way we can think about that.
Okay. And still, I've been coming to these meetings since you talked about AMAs, I don't know how many years ago. And nobody from the state has yet to contact me except for Tom Shaban about recharge. I have some of the best recharge in the state. Well, I should say in this area. And the only one that's remotely talked to me is Jackie. And it was just in brief conversation, and she said she would be getting in touch with me. So that's between her and I. The state people have not yet contacted me. Okay? So I'm going to just leave that. And the final note, and then I will quit, is that I think that the Valley is becoming a science project. Thank you.
I'm not sure I followed that last bit. A SAJ project? Science project.
Science.
Okay. I apologize. I sure hope not. I'm going to give you my card though. If you call me, I don't have your number, but if you call me, I'll have it. And I'll call you back if I don't answer. Yes, ma'am.
So I will put a plug in for the county. I'm with the flood control district, and we are doing a watershed study on the Willcox Basin. And we will be presenting our findings to the Board of Supervisors probably in October at a work session. And the watershed study that we're doing is to find locations in the Willcox Basin that would double as recharge and flood control to help prevent some of the flooding that's happening in Willcox. And so we do have that study's about 80% completed.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Rich Sammartino, and I'm a property owner in Cochise as of December, so new to the area. But I wanted to ask how you got to that 50% because I read that, I know these numbers are, you're still estimating them, but I read that you're estimating there's a 3-to-1 overdraft right now. And a 50% reduction of that, if my math is right, would still mean we're drafting twice as much water as would be in total balance. So why was that considered acceptable?
Thank you. Yeah, what I will note, we didn't give you a number today, and the only slide that spoke to it is it said that we're still compiling the most recent year's data, and then we will be able to get better numbers in the fall. I say that, and I promise I'm not trying to be squirrely about it. We want to make sure that when we give you a number, you can take that to the bank, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure we understand the most recent years and then to give a 5-year average. Now, that said, broad strokes, your question is broadly correct wherever the number might be, right? A 50% reduction in overdraft is not a reduction in all, or is not an elimination of overdraft, right? So how did we get there? The answer, frankly, is understanding that A, Willcox doesn't have the kind of surface water supplies that other places have. So where do you go for the water when you make those kind of reductions? Number two, the availability of supplies like effluent that large areas like Phoenix might have also aren't here. There's not a large water supplier here that can take a bunch of water that they're getting as return flows and treat that to sell it back. The options are more limited. And then lastly, the economic impact, right? What happens to a community when you say overdraft goes away? So that's where the 50% number comes from. An understanding, Ed spoke to that this doesn't solve everything, but it starts at moving in that direction. Understanding that kind of, and if there's a theme, the theme of the afternoon is incremental change, incremental progress towards that goal. Not only is it not fixing the problem overnight, it's taking some time, but honestly, there's a long way to go for a place like Willcox. So that's the answer to your question. Did you have a follow-up? Yeah.
I'm coming at this from the perspective of I moved out here to do homesteading, so I don't own an agricultural operation, and I guess I just want to voice my opinion that these earth fissures pose a public safety risk, and so you're talking over 50 years. It's like, is that going to open up under a road or a gas line? And then I had a well share when I moved here, and that had to be deepened at a cost that was prohibitive for me. So talking about economic impact and the rug being pulled out from under you, I just want to speak for residents who economically have had the rug pulled out from under them because of their wells going dry.
Thank you. I don't have a response that can properly address that, right? There's no way that I can just, well, I promise I will. I can't minimize what that's like for folks out here who've had to deepen well. I know folks out here who've either had to pay to deepen a well or they would have had to but couldn't afford it. I can't minimize that, right? I live in Mesa where I don't have to worry about that. So my response should not be seen as minimizing that. At the same time, when we're in a place like Willcox where things are pretty rough already, earth fissures are here already, the choice we have is to move in the right direction, and we're trying to do that in a way that can make sense for the community. So I don't mean to be dismissive. Go ahead.
You make a very good point. I want you to know that through the years, we should have done this. Sitting right up here and right back here are some men that tried to approach this 2015, guys. And most of us, Marvin and I were joking, we fit in the old timer group now, but we've seen agriculture come and go with depending on economy and prices. So from 1980 to 1990, we actually, the Russian grain embargo that Jimmy Carter put in 1980 made grain prices really tough. I was a young farmer and so were some other men in here. Acres went way down. The number is right at 50% went out of production from 1980 to 1990. If you study it with EWR, you will actually see that by 1990, water levels had come back up. So to our hope of being able to help this, number one, I promise you, legislatively, it has not happened. What you see us trying to do was a circumvent to get around that, because there's groups. It's called tyranny of injustice. They don't care that you don't have water. They care that we have our property rights and that's it. But in water, what runs under this ground is all of ours. From Governor Hobbs, and I gladly speak for her, I know Katie really well, she has taken this across the state. I have been on every corner of the state being a part of her policy council. We're trying really hard to use the laws that we said. And Ben, I did not mean that you didn't know what you're doing as a young lawyer, but when I talked to, and I'll say her name, Kathy Ferris, she has helped us a bunch, and she was in the beginning part of this. There's two others that I've spoken with that helped write this. That's when we came to this. So I'll address you just the same as I addressed Lisa. I know it's frustrating from y'all's standpoint to where it is, but for those of us, like to hear Ted and Brent stand up and say they're glad that we're here. These are people that are making their livelihoods out of farming right here, and they're willing to start sacrificing to make it. Technology, and Patrick Adams with the governor's office doesn't like it when I talk about technology, but we got to be real. Guys, there's technology coming that will make us produce more pounds of crop with less gallons of water. An FFA kid summed it up at Benson 2 years ago, more crop per drop. I liked what he said. And so none of this is an immediate answer. That's what I want to keep saying is we don't have the immediate answer, but it's a good start. Jackie has been very involved in the Douglas Basin. You're on the GUAC board, right, Jackie? And so there's people here you can talk to. The main thing is if we understand that this is the beginning of a process, that we all will get better. And the one thing you have to understand is those of us that farm, and I'm the only live farmer on the governor's council, but we recognize truly, especially in Cochise County, if I went around the room and I asked each farmer here how much they had spent repairing wells, I think you all would be shocked because it's in the millions. It's not in the hundreds of thousands anymore. It used to be back in the 90s, we had a well problem. I figured roughly 17,000 every time I pulled a well, Stuart. Today, you're lucky if it's 50,000, and more often than not, it's 100 because you got to go in and fix a bunch of breaks. So we understand equally as well as you homeowners, the situation is serious. That's why Governor Hobbs appointed myself as a farmer that she knew we understood, and I'm thankful she did. I hope I helped some. So anyway, I just wanted to put that.
Thanks, Ed.
I'm hearing agricultural efficiency, but is there any restriction on more industry coming in? Is there any restriction on more housing coming in? Is it only agriculture that's stopped?
Madison will know better. I'll let Madison say.
So with the establishment of the AMA, there is no more expansion on acres. That halts the expansion on irrigation acres. With municipalities, there is room for expansion to build homes. That is always kind of available to be able to provide water to people. We want to be able to where you can turn your tap on and you have water. For industry such as industrial, they have to go through specific permitting processes and have time limit on those permits to be able to have those if that's the case. It's very specific to those and case by case on the industrial side of things, but yes. In industrial, yes.
And the clarification I might add, right, is that an industrial user will still need to go out and get the legal authority to do that, whether they get a water right. There's different kinds. There's type 1s and type 2s. They'll have to go get a water right to be able to do that. And there will be a conservation program that would apply to industrial users as well. We've talked about ag because in Willcox, most of the water coming out, it's going to ag, but industrial users as well will have conservation requirements, as will municipalities, right? So even though we're not going to be going in and saying to a municipality, you can't give water to the homes that need it, there will still be conservation requirements that would apply to them as well. But the big user here is ag. Yes, ma'am. The question is, what about mines? They fall under industry. So the conservation requirements that would apply to the industrial users would apply to mines. What's that going to look like? We'll be setting that in the management plan. So we've spoken with some vagaries, right? We're not giving a lot of detail with what's in that plan because we have to do that. We have to set those requirements. But we have heard folks are concerned about wanting to know what kind of conservation requirements apply to industrial. And we've heard mining specifically, not for the first time just now.
I would also like to add, Ben mentioned type 1 and type 2s. Those are different forms of grandfathered rights. So just like the irrigation grandfathered rights, those non-irrigation grandfathered rights will need to have been in place to establish those.
I wanted to follow up on something Ed said. My name's Rona McMillan. We're a vineyard owner in Kansas Settlement. What I'm hearing from Ed and seeing today from your presentation is that there is the desire to build in flexibility for in our scenario, it's for low water use crops, and we would love to see that. So definitely support that kind of approach. And there may be other ideas out there that would make it even more equitable for small users versus large users, but that would be definitely something I think that the vineyards would want to support. There are things that vineyards are looking for that cannot be, and we know is not supported by the AMA. And if we want to fight those battles, we have to go back to the legislature for that. And I guess we just need to recognize that, but support what we can within the AMA.
Alan Seitz. Something we had in our proposed bill in 2015 that some growers in here worked on was we had low water use crops. At the time, we were estimating, but if there was 5,000 acres of vineyards and we had, say, 100,000 acres of irrigated cropland in the valley, that you could increase, and this is not a proposal in here, but that we had this in our proposal at the time, was that you could increase up to 10% of the irrigated acres in the valley, that would be an option under low water use crops. So that may be something to look at on some type of a percentage basis to allow the vineyards that are low water use, that they would they could expand. A lot of the vineyards have bought 40 or 50 acres and they've got 10 planted. So that was an option that we worked on. I have no idea if that's under consideration now, but.
Thanks, Alan. We are looking for the flexibility that we can do. I don't want to offend anyone again with the feedback. We are looking for flexibility where we can, but as was alluded to earlier, there are bounds within the structure of the AMAs.
Just your meetings going forward, are you going to have separate meetings specifically for agriculture, municipal, industrial, where they can get together and kind of hash it out?
That's right. What we're expecting is plenty of those kinds of meetings. We recognize right now is the busy season for a lot of our the folks in the wine growing industry. So we want to be able to come out here and talk to some of them specifically to make sure that what this conversation we're having today, all of them get the benefit of that. So we expect that after probably the second week of September when things calm down for them. We expect larger meetings with agricultural users to make sure we can get all those Aggies together and sort through how that's going to work. We're going to need to talk to the city and see how that's going to work, and industrial users as well. So we're going to be having a lot more of these meetings, probably less this large informational setting and more of a workshop where we sit in a circle and hash this out. But that's exactly right. We're going to need those and probably lots of conversations with folks.
I just wanted to add to that. Yes, we are hoping to have the municipal and industrial conservation programs, individual workshop meetings in September, and in the fall, an ag meeting and a data type of analysis kind of meeting to hash out some numbers. This is where we'll just kind of sit around, talk, have just very open conversations where you'll be able to share conversations, ideas, not in this kind of open setting with microphones and we're in suit jackets. So it's going to be more collaborative and idea based. So.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah. Steve Kissel, I'm a domestic well user in the Sunsites Pierce area, and been active with the working for some kind of management of the groundwater here for about 5 years now. I think what we're hearing today is this is a complex, very difficult situation. We've dug ourselves into a deep hole here, and we're going to have a heck of a time getting out of it because this overdraft is very significant. The AMA is only part of the answer, and I think we all want to see the AMA fix all these problems. We're not going to be able to get to the level of reductions. The level of reductions that we need unless we get some help outside the AMA. And that most of that's going to happen legislatively. We could do something around a regional water authority, but it brings in things like Jackie talked about the recharge. The AMA, a lot of that's outside the purview of the AMA. That can be part of the AMA plan, but the actual funding and making that happen is going to happen through other funding sources and through other agencies. So, so that's number one. The other thing we're going to need help with is really funding some of the innovation that's going to need to happen. And the crop, maybe in some cases, you talk about getting more crop per drop. Maybe that means converting to new kinds of crops. Something that's at 4 feet per acre, something that's 2 feet per acre. But all this is it's going to require a lot of innovation and change over these next 50 years and beyond. I'm an optimist by nature, so we have to do it, not because I think I have any special knowledge of how we can do it, but if we don't, most of us, our grandkids, our great grandkids, won't be able to live here. We know that the future won't be here, so we have to figure that out. And I would invite all those who want to see that happen. There are ways we can do some of this legislatively. We've proposed some of these changes that will make the AMA even more flexible, give the AMA some more tools, that will help with this conversion, these reductions. And we need to, hopefully we need to see some of that happen in the next few years to make this work for all of us. I commend ADWR's willingness to collaborate and listen. I think they, as Ed said and others said, they're really trying to do this right. This is kind of a new territory for them. There's a lot that they've had to kind of get, since the Douglas Basin was the first subsequent AMA in 45 years. Willcox is the second. They're still on a learning curve here, so we need to be patient. But I'm really impressed with the level of collaboration and the involvement they're bringing in from the local community. And I think they are really listening. And I also want to commend Ed and Ted and Brent Hodge for publicly acknowledging the need to do this as some of the bigger growers here, and the collaborative effort with ADWR in making this happen, because we can't do it without you. And we need to get Riverview out here and talking about what they're willing to do, because I know they have some plans as well, because we definitely cannot do it if they're not on board. So. Sorry. All right. So I think that's pretty much all I want to say, but thank you. I appreciate it. I think we've got a lot of work to do to get this moving forward.
When I told you I grew up I'm from Pima in the Gila Valley, and somebody told me who knows this area, when we talked about coming down here, they said, you better wear a bulletproof vest, which we didn't do. But I'll tell you what, my big worry was getting disadvantaged to Christmas this year if I really do this wrong. And I'm hopeful. What I'm hearing today, I'm very hopeful, folks. I feel like there's a path. We're getting some questions online. Do you want to read those for me, Madison? And we'll make sure we're covering this out loud.
Yes. Okay, the first question is from Sandy. Since this AMA plan went to a vote, how was the governor able to overrule the voters and put the AMA in place?
I'm glad for that question. I'll clarify probably how people are understanding the law. So for subsequent AMAs, there are two paths to establishing them. They are independent of each other. The voters can petition, or folks can petition to have it added to the ballot, and there's a process for doing that. And once it gets to the ballot, folks in the basin can vote to establish an AMA or not. There was a vote, and folks decided at the time it wasn't the right move. Later, the department used the second option, which is that the director looked at the situation here, the amount of overdraft, the amount of subsidence, the fissuring that was there, and the need to protect water supplies for future uses, and establish the AMA based on that. So there are two paths. It wasn't to override a vote, but it was using a path laid out in the law.
All right. Anthony has a question. If rainwater catchment is used for irrigation or as a primary water source for irrigation, how would that be taken into consideration?
I'm looking at Anthony, who's also got a law license, although I'm inactive, so I probably shouldn't say, I shouldn't act like I'm an attorney who's allowed to be here. I'm hesitant to go out on a limb just yet, but we can find an answer for that and share that with the group.
Next question is from Gabe. Do you have any numbers on how much each sector uses in acre feet of water?
Not that we're able to share today, right? Looking at it, we're pretty confident that ag's the biggest user, but we're not able to give with specificity how much is used by each sector.
Right. Sandy has the next question. You talk about 3 sectors. What percentage does each sector use of the 100% total? The breakdown of the percentages of each use for the farmers that is used is not correct.
I'm not sure about the breakdown to which she's referring. I don't know if
I
you can,
think we've mentioned about 80%,
but not in today's meeting.
but not in today's meeting. Yeah, I think that's something we're going to have to look into when we collect more data and get an answer back to you.
I think that's the answer.
Catherine has a question. How does this impact new agricultural well drilling?
How does the creation of the AMA impact new well drilling? Well, there's going to be rules about where wells can go. There's going to be rules about where you can irrigate. And if anyone has a specific question, we'd be willing to talk through with that. The rules about the AMAs are pretty complex and varied. So I'm hesitant to talk through all of those things. But if someone's looking at putting a new well in, or if someone's looking at putting a field into production, we advise you reach out, right? And you'll want to make sure that if you need to, you've retained an attorney and you have the rights that you need to do that. So what Steve says is you can't put a new well to irrigate new land. And the answer is yes, but, right? You can get an irrigation grandfathered right for land that you have put into production. And there's also the ability to get an irrigation grandfathered right because of a substantial capital investment. And that's what I'm referring to. But generally speaking, the creation of the AMA caps the land that can be put into irrigation. But there is that flexibility for substantial capital investment.
So I'd just be remiss if I didn't say this, but one of the things that I think should be contained in the public documents is just our area, our residents, very low income. And so making energy efficient improvements, water efficient improvements is very difficult. I know that we would have had no way of updating our sprinkler systems at the park without WIFA and without funding to WIFA. So I think in government, we call these unfunded mandates, right? It's, hey, do this or else, right? And we have to figure out ways to do that. And so I think finding funding sources from WIFA, and I know that the state legislator kind of cut funding for WIFA a little bit this past couple of years. And so I'll just give you an example, Mr. Klump. We were able to put in smart irrigation systems at all 4 of our parks. It cost $1.5 million. We didn't have to pay a dime. WIFA paid for it. That saves us almost 50% on irrigation every year. So the city, we're there, right? Now we got our residents we need you to flush 1 time a day instead of twice, right? It's so there's not a lot of water savings capacity there. We tried with our cemetery. That was a big fight, while you're removing grass. And so I think those are things that we're trying to do as a city. And with future development, we could create landscaping standards where instead of putting in grass, we require rock, landscape, hardscape. We want some sort of trees here, so we change our tree palette. So those are things that we're already looking at as a city anyways. But I do think it would be important for us just to, again, say we need more funding from the state for this. I don't know how we turn that into a goal is to seek additional funds to assist the community, and not only the residents, but I'd also say the farmers. WIFA gave out over $300 million in the last couple of years, and they were giving things to like toilets in Scottsdale, right? Urinals and water efficient. And where we could really be saving money is to assist the small farmers who don't have grant writers to go after these funds to come and help incorporate drought tolerant savings or just more efficient irrigation techniques.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right, we have a few more questions online. For the GUAC, how many people will be on the committee, and why can't everyone who applies be on the committee?
I believe it's by statute that it's limited to 5. I'm looking at Anthony. Anthony's looking in the statute. We're going to say 5 until he tells me I'm wrong. So that's how numbers work, right? Not everyone will be able to be appointed.
5. Yeah, that is correct. It is in statute that it's 5 members.
What's next?
Okay. Of those mile of fissures, how deep are they? And are they all due to water and groundwater subsidence? And are they concentrated on one area of the AMA?
That is a good question. I'm not prepared to answer that one, but we can certainly look into it. But do they, I think it asks how deep they are, which I don't think if someone knows, Ryan will know. Yeah, we'll find out.
All right. Next question. I have an ag well on my property, around 40 acres, but I haven't used it since I bought the property in 2020. Am I now prevented from using my well to start producing on my property?
That's one of those, I think it was the third slide where we said, if you have specific questions about your circumstance, it's probably best to contact us directly. I certainly wouldn't want to work through one particular person's situation in front of all your neighbors. Great question to direct to the department.
All right. One more. Has the state considered dry wells in our floodplains as a way of recharging the aquifer?
What I'll say is what goes into the management plan is not set yet, but we are open to talking about it wherever that might be. We want to hear how folks are looking at that and what you think could work. Go ahead, Ed.
I understand Gail Griffin and Tim Dunn got a bill through. Jack, you may know that they put $250,000 toward some recharge wells here. And I'm sure we'll be working with Philip on that.
All right. Was that the last of them? Excellent. All right, folks. We have been here for quite a bit at this point. Do we have any other questions or comments? Okay.
The dairy was mentioned. Steve, you mentioned it. They were the first to the table to offer the most cuts. And those who were in that meeting will tell you that. So they're on board with us. They understand.
Well, Ed can talk for people that I can't talk for. That's absolutely for sure. All right, folks. Thank you for coming out here. I'll reiterate, all this information will be online and available to you, including my contact information. Feel free to reach out. Thank you so much.
backyard and the gazebo. I